to do a little bit of deep dives into other areas than the financial services industry. So we will hear the first session that will be about legal tech and what's happening in that industry and how far are we there with, you know, use cases and solutions. So first we will hear Graeme talking about setting the scene, what's happening in the industry, tips and tricks, and then there will be followed by a fireside chat with Vlad and with Colin Laird from Brightflag. Okay, guys, over to you. Have fun.
Thank you very much, Mona, and thank you for inviting me along today. Now, I just want to check, is my shared screen visible?
Yes.
Great. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Given that this is a RegTech conference, I'm going to assume that each of you is familiar with RegTech, but you might be a little bit less familiar with its close relative LegalTech. So what I'm going to speak to you today about is the relationship between LegalTech and RegTech. So a few questions here. How does LegalTech fit with RegTech? Do they compete, for example? Do they complement each other? Do they compete with each other? These are the sorts of things that we're going to discuss today. But in order to understand the dynamic between these two, it makes sense to learn a little bit about LegalTech's background. The majority of LegalTech companies are pretty new. So as you can see here, new LegalTech product launches exploded starting in around 2013. Since then, we've seen 274 document automation companies, 225 legal marketplace companies, 210 practice management companies, 107 legal analytics companies, 84 legal research companies, 51 e-discovery companies, 40 legal education companies, 35 compliance companies, and 34 online dispute resolution companies. And the information from this is actually drawn from Codex Tech Index, which is out of Stanford, collected by Stanford from 2020. All right, before this, things looked a bit different. So 5 to 10 years ago, the legal industry and the legal market specifically was focused, or the legal tech market, I should say, was focused solely on law firms. Law firms controlled the use of legal tech, which is largely focused on e-discovery at that point. And the way it most often played out was that the client would outsource its legal tech needs to panel firms. So it paid each of its panel firms to provide access to legal tech products based on the use it would need for those products for its legal matters. And often it was actually the case that the same technology was being used at each of the firms. So if you think about it, especially with e-discovery, for example, what we're looking at on the screen here is we've got a client, that client has got a panel of law firms. So each of those different law firms then is using legal technology that's just sitting behind the firm there to provide services to the client. And now in the case of the client, it's likely, if it's got a panel of law firms, that it is perhaps a serial litigant. So it's got a number of different matters that are on the go at all times. And the kind of characteristic that's shared about these different matters is that they routinely involve the most senior members of the firm or of the company. So what you're really looking at here is a single company that's paying multiple law firms to use the same technology, but is paying for it multiple times with each of these different law firms. So not an ideal situation for the customers in the scenario, although it certainly works well for law firms and for the legal tech providers that were providing that information. But what I think is interesting is kind of what happened next here. So because firms controlled the uptake of legal tech, there's this natural inclination when onboarding new tech to ask the question, will this help our firm's margins, or maybe will this hurt our firm's margins? And of course, only those products that help law firm margins, or at worst, that did no damage, would be passed on for use by the client. Now, you can't blame law firms for this because they're businesses too. So from about 5 years ago, something really interesting began to happen. And that's that in-house teams started contacting legal tech vendors directly. So you can see here, what we're doing here is we're passing only those legal tech products that are actually passing the litmus test of not harming the law firm onto the benefit of the client. Any that do harm the law firm through reduced margins, for example, or anything else, reduced business, wouldn't be taken up by the law firm and hence wouldn't be passed on to their customers. Now, what happened though that I thought was really interesting was around 5 years ago, just when we saw that starting of the uptick, when we were looking at legal tech companies or vendors as well, is that the companies themselves started stepping away from this direct relationship with their law firms. So they came to the conclusion that it was in their best interests, in some cases, to go out and start procuring legal tech directly. So not going through the law firms anymore. And if we look at this diagram here, what we can see is a new relationship that's emerged where the client, the customer, in many cases is continuing to consume legal tech services through their panel firms. But in other instances, they're going directly to those legal tech vendors. And in some cases, they're actually using a single legal tech vendor and they're instructing their law firms to go and access that legal tech platform in order to provide services to them. So they've kind of flipped the equation, if you will, which I thought is really interesting as well, just in terms of how our market's evolving. All right. So the other thing I think that's interesting about this is that up until this time, legal tech vendors had really been focused solely on law firms as the legal tech market. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because I mean, if you're creating a tech platform or something like that for the legal industry, who's using it? Of course, lawyers are using it. Where are you going to go and find some lawyers? They're all done with the law firms. So let's create technology, legal tech for law firms and law firms only. The reality, though, is there are a lot of lawyers out there that are working in-house that could really be benefiting from this technology. And when you take a step back and think about it, the ultimate beneficiary of these technologies is the ultimate client of the law firms, which are these companies that are procuring services through the law firms anyways. So it makes a lot of sense for legal tech companies to start looking at the broader market, which is all corporates everywhere. Okay, so that kind of brings us then to how RegTech and LegalTech fit together. And I'm conscious of time here, so I don't want to take too much. But what we're looking at here is RegTech and LegalTech are really just two ends of a spectrum. So that spectrum spans regulation, it spans compliance and legal work as laws are created, as they're enforced, as they're abided by for the most part, hopefully, and sometimes as they're broken. And we can see here the kind of relationship that fits there. So we've got government that's passing legislation, we've got the regulators who are enforcing the legislation, and we've got the companies and the people, so the B2B and the B2C in terms of who legal tech purchases are, that are either abiding by that legislation and the regulation and maybe using different applications to do that, but quite often they're also missing the mark. They're stepping outside of their regulatory obligations perhaps, and really that's where the legal tech side of thing comes in, because something has happened and now we're reacting to it. Okay, so if we look at RegTech first, on this side, it's built to facilitate regulatory compliance. So what that means is that it is largely proactive. On the other side, we've got LegalTech, which is there to facilitate the the delivery of legal services. And so when you think about that, legal services, they're usually incurred when something has already happened. So they are reactive. And if we put the two of these together, what we see is that they're actually quite complementary. So on the left side, what we've got is the RegTech position, for the most part, being proactive. These are the regulatory frameworks that you need to do your business within, and we're setting up boundaries, we're setting up frameworks that you can operate in so that you don't need to manually continue to verify that you are in kind of abidance with the regulatory requirements. And then on the other side, we've got a whole bunch of services from the legal tech perspective that have been created mostly for those instances where you step outside of your regulatory obligations. So you are now being charged by a regulator of some sort for having done something wrong from a corporate perspective. You would then go and engage the legal services of one of your law firms. That law firm, in the course of providing its services to you, be using legal tech to do so. Okay, so over time, I believe that RegTech will naturally encroach on the territory of legal services. Its purpose is to facilitate regulatory compliance and to avoid breaking laws and the legal services that necessarily follow. But I don't think it will necessarily encroach on legal tech, at least in its reactive guise. And my reason for thinking this way, and it's a topic actually that we're going to cover in the Fireside chat that's coming up right after this with Colin and Vlad, is that the legal industry is incredibly slow to change. So as long as there are companies out there whose legal departments continue to operate reactively in their regulatory environments, laws are going to continue to be broken, and lawyers, along with their legal tech, are going to continue to be needed. So it's not so much that RegTech and legal tech continue to operate just hand in glove and there's no overlap. There's absolutely overlap, but the bigger reality, I think, is that we have such a complacent industry in terms of adoption and change within legal specifically, that the addressable market is just much, much larger than any kind of impingement that you would see from RegTech moving into legal tech or legal tech pushing back. So I think that's the reality for the foreseeable future. Now, before we get to that conversation, what I thought I would do is just make the point that becoming more proactive doesn't have to be difficult. So at Alpha Creates, we use this model to help our clients. And it's the idea that a good digital transformation strategy takes a long-term view of technology as an enabler. So the first tip, if you will, then, is that you need to start with the problem, not with the technology. And this is something that was actually just mentioned in the last session in terms of silver bullet. We think about silver bullet, is this the silver bullet, that sort of question. And when we start with the problem, we actually get the silver bullet as an outcome. So we start with the problem, we define it, we understand which people are operating in the area that has the problem, what are the processes that are in place, can we improve those processes to tighten things up? Finally, is there a technology that we can apply that's going to be the silver bullet to this problem? What we see though, quite often is technology is taken at the first step. So instead of it being a silver bullet, it's now this broad net that's cast out. We buy some technology, we throw it out there, and we hope that we catch some problems that we can solve. That's not the right way to go about it. Very much problem first, all the way down to technology at the end. So second then is make sure that your legal tech solutions, or perhaps just your tech solutions more broadly, are interoperable. And what this means is that a lot of the different solutions that we see in the market today are point solutions. They are very well targeted at specific and precise problems, but if you have too many problems solved with point solutions, you create another problem, and that is that you've got a bunch of point solutions, none of which talk to each other. So it bears, it's very valuable at the outset to make sure you're considering how all of these different solutions are going to work together. And that brings me to my last point, which is applying a structured approach to technology selection. It's something that, again, a lot of people don't think about because, hey, this technology is making the most noise, so it must be the best. What you really need to do, though, is for your own company's circumstances, think about what is the best technology for my specific circumstances. And once you've identified what your criteria are, what your constraints are, then you can find that solution that is going to best address the needs that you have. All right, so that's all that I wanted to talk about in terms of legal tech and RegTech. But what I'd like to do now is get Colin and Vlad to come online with me. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen as well. And we can maybe get into the chat portion of this segment. Hello, Colin.
Hi, Graeme.
All right, so we are just waiting on Vlad. We'll give him a few minutes. And in the interim, maybe you could give us just a little bit of a background about yourself, Colin. I know you're doing some pretty cool work in the, well, I don't want to categorize actually what industry you're in. I was going to say it's the legal tech industry, but it's not really, is it? It really fits a much broader kind of description than just legal tech. So could you give us a bit of background about kind of where you are right now, but also kind of where you came from in getting there?
Yeah, thanks, Graeme, and thanks for having me. And enjoyed your presentation. I thought it was a really nice summary. And
thank you.
Yeah, I guess in terms of the industry that we're in, I tend to think more that we're in the sort of legal department modernization industry, because legal departments are clearly very complex entities, so to speak, that have a lot of different needs. And so what we're doing is evolving quite rapidly over time. So I'm actually a technologist to trade. I don't have a legal bone in my body, even though I'm working for a company that focuses on helping legal departments. And I've been with this company called Brightflag for 3 years now. And they're focused on helping bring more transparency into the relationships with law firms. And I thought you quite eloquently put that, there's it's a very important relationship, a necessarily complex relationship with law firms. And, I'll be bold to say that there's quite a lot of inefficiency in that model. And so Brightflag is using some of the most modern machine learning language analysis to actually read law firm invoices and help, legal departments make sense of what can be a 40-page invoice, filled with narrative line items to really see if they're getting value for money. So it's quite an interesting problem space. But we also help with matter management and other areas as well.
Okay, well, that's interesting. And I think that's a really good segue into our conversation. So let's just have it. But I mean, thinking about, if I was a conspiracy theorist, I would be certain that there's a conspiracy out there by in-house counsel and by law firms to kind of agree on the worst possible way of doing things from a business perspective, at least, and maintain the status quo. Now, of course, that's not true. I mean, we've got these ethical obligations.
Guys, do you see me?
Hey, Vlad, how are you?
Good. Thanks.
Excellent.
Just checking. Sorry.
Perfect. Well, welcome. You are just in time. We're just getting into the conversation. And what I'm really asking is, when we're thinking about law firms and how they relate to legal tech vendors, let's say, but also to their clients, there's this ethical obligation that as lawyers, we have to make sure that we're doing things in the best possible way for our clients. And a lot of times, I think that's used as a crutch for not adopting new technologies under the guise that, hey, it's too risky, it's unproven technology. It could well be that the reality is the complete reverse, and the best outcome for the client is in fact served by modernizing practices or by adopting technologies that would radically improve the way that you're delivering your services. Maybe Vlad, I'll turn to you just for a second. Do you have a view on that in terms of the cost benefit kind of analysis of applying new technologies to the delivery of legal services?
Of course, this new age of technological revolution implies some kind of new outside the box thinking, and the main trend which is seen and which mostly impacts everything is the fact that the market moves away from the law firms to the in-house legal work, and this trend, of course, implies new ways of the delivery of legal services. And another factor to be considered is the fact that the market really gets globalized, and people need to instantly access knowledge in different countries all over the world. This all implies the new way of delivery of legal knowledge, not just assessing risks or requesting and coding for legal work, but to assess knowledge and to request knowledge, which is embodied in the legal documents.
Yeah, so I guess if you think about what it is that is best going to serve your clients, it's a very clear answer, but I don't know that we actually get to making that assessment. So Colin, maybe I'll come to you here. Why is it that it seems so hard to make these changes in terms of things that are, I mean, they're apparent that this is a better way to conduct yourself, but we still have such a hard time getting there?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, and it's interesting because, if you look at the main building blocks of an organization, such as finance, HR, procurement, those elements of an organization have all gone through, I would say, a significant degree of modernization. They have new applications, new systems, new people, process, technology elements. And often that rolls up into a sort of digital transformation agenda of the broader organization, as it moves to using more cloud services, for example. And yet legal, for some reason, has sort of not been on that bus. They've been sort of left to their own devices because clearly what they do is is sort of also fundamental to the organization. Perhaps it's just, we shouldn't mess with legal, we shouldn't change legal. But what that's sort of created, in my opinion and my experience, is that there isn't a culture of experimentation within legal departments. There isn't senior management support nor really understanding of what modernization means. And also often there's not actually a cost mandate in terms of they're having to actually reduce costs and given a plan and a method as to doing that. So if you talk to lawyers, they say, yeah, we do have to reduce our costs, but they don't really know how to do it, and nor are they measured to do it. So I think, the time has changed, and I think, digital transformation of the legal department is going to become, just the baseline requirement for, as we move forward. And we're starting to see that happen with the legal operations movement, for example, appearing. Yeah,
okay. So that's interesting to me. It's maybe I'll just play devil's advocate here for a second. And so is there anything wrong with the view that we don't need legal tech or RegTech because we're lawyers and it's our job to handle this stuff? Thank you very much. So why do I need to bring a system in when I'm actually hired and being paid to do this exact work anyways?
Yeah, it's a good one. Look, I'll give a very short answer, and I'd like to give Vlad a response to that as well. I mean, the reality is that ultimately what technology does is it makes people's lives better. That's on a personal level, but clearly that rolls up into an organizational responsibility when we think about, RegTech and being a responsible corporate citizen. So technology, when applied appropriately, it makes people's lives more efficient. So they're focusing on things that are much more fulfilling for them as individuals. But then as an organization, the organization improves. So I think it's impossible to ignore the need for modernization.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Vlad, coming over to you on that same question. I mean, you've got great background experience with working in a law firm, so you're certainly familiar with that business model. But you're now on this panel as a founder of a legal tech firm, so you are certainly familiar with the need for these sorts of legal tech applications to be pushed out into the market as well. How do you see that dynamic working, and where is that friction starting?
Okay, first of all, while working at my law firm, I haven't had a chance of selling to my colleagues, to my colleague lawyers, and I can say that this process is really painful. And I once met a guy working at another legal tech startup who doesn't have a legal background, and he was with a major bulge bracket investment bank before, and he was astonished with the market. He told me he'd never seen such a long and painful sales cycle in his life. So lawyers are very risk averse and very reluctant buyers of anything.
That's a great point.
Their normal modus operandi is to check a thing 15 times before even thinking of buying. Yeah. So this results in a very long sales cycle, and the fact that legal technology founders invent myriads of models, most of which are not used by the industry at all. So there's a major disconnect between what people get financing for and are building, and what their clients need, if ever.
Okay, well, let me ask a follow-up question then to both of you, which I think bears directly on that. When we're thinking about clients, when we're thinking about who are we selling to in the legal tech industry and in the RegTech industry for that matter, are we thinking, at least when we're talking about legal departments, that we're focused on the wrong client? Because the benefit is actually aimed at the corporate rather than the legal department itself. They're the ones that are going to see the benefit of this. They're the ones that presumably are much better positioned to be saying that's a great change and one that we need to make. So are the conversations really happening in the wrong place in terms of legal tech vendors trying to sell into legal teams in companies? Colin, maybe I'll hit you up with that first.
Yeah, look, it's a good one. And I mean, my view on that is that most legal departments, they don't really have an owner for modernization. So lawyers are busy being lawyers necessarily so, and there's no one that holds the modernization agenda. And so, I mean, in saying that, there is an exception to that with the legal operations role appearing within legal departments, still relatively new, gained a lot of traction in North America and Europe, just starting to take off in APAC. So the legal operations person is a classic owner for that modernization agenda. Without that, you're looking for a young or mature, hungry lawyer that would like to help the organization in a bigger picture sense. And not every organization has that.
Yeah, I guess a lot of the time poor is definitely a problem that most in-house counsel share. And sometimes you're so busy trying to fight against the fire hose that you don't have time to step back and say, is there a better way to solve this problem? But do you have a view on that?
Yes, of course. Again, given the process of moving away from hiring law firms to get a job done in major companies, in-house lawyers tend to focus on doing many things, if not everything, themselves. Hiring people from the market, getting them instructed, and doing everything in-house without even hiring any outside counsel. And this process, again, from the end of the platform that we are building right now, results in many requests for knowledge and precedent documents being directed to their colleagues, actual and former. And this is a normal thing in the legal world, just to ask a colleague for a precedent document of sort. And we are actually trying to monetize this. So when people ask each other for a precedent, normally they would assume that their loving colleagues give it to them for free, which doesn't always work this way in reality. So it's a good way of launching a marketplace, in fact.
No, it's a great idea. Absolutely. So
that's how we ourselves want to capitalize on these trends.
Yeah.
And
sure.
and another model that we're seeing right now is again due to the fact that everything gets globalized. People try drafting documents governed by the law, which has nothing to do with their jurisdiction or area of practice. And again, they need something to start with. They normally start with knowledge platforms like Practical Law.
Yeah, no, I get it.
It's really old school now.
But do you see an adoption issue is more my question. So, I mean, there's definitely a market for this, but is there an adoption issue just because lawyers are so kind of hesitant to adopt things? And I think that goes back to what Colin was saying earlier.
Of course, there is a huge adoption issue.
Yeah.
You spend really much time just explaining the whole thing to the very busy people, or not very busy, but always behaving as if they were very busy by.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're just about out of time here. So what I want to do is maybe just quickly wrap up And maybe I'll just go to each of you for kind of a 20-second synopsis of your view of how legal tech can benefit. I mean, corporations generally, law firms as well, but I mean, what are we really trying to do here? What we're trying to do is, from my perspective at least, bring some structure to the way that people are doing things, help them be more productive, increase the visibility of the work that they're doing so that it doesn't have to be repeated, that sort of thing. Colin, what do you think?
Yeah, look, in 20 seconds or less, I think that legal departments have to modernize. The technology is available for them to be better and more efficient, to do things in less time, and for information to be shared more readily. It's all there, like all of the technology is there. It's just that most of them don't want to look at it. And so, you know, they need to find an owner for modernization, actually embrace modernization. They need to have help with defining what their challenges are, because they're not very good at that either. Help with defining how to prioritize those challenges once they know, and also to see vendors differently. You know, start to partner with vendors, use vendors as consultants to help them. You know, just because you talk to a vendor doesn't mean you have to buy what they do, but you can learn a lot from them. And I think that other industries understand that, but that's new to legal.
Yeah, okay. Any last words from you, Vlad? We are completely out of time now, so I'm going to have to pull us all off the stage here, but do you have any last words kind of on that theme?
Yes, I do believe that the legal technology market, first, is huge, up to 1 trillion, and second, ripe for real disruption. And lawyers are the people who produce the most information and documents ever. And this process is repeated. So once this information and value is unlocked, we can see a huge kaboom.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank you both. Vlad, that was excellent. Thank you for joining us. Colin, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for joining us as well. And Mona, I'm going to now turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, guys. And I think
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. So the first half of our full day event has just ended. We are now going into the lunch break, which doesn't mean that you should log off and, you know, have lunch, because we have a program for you. But we already said from the beginning, the whole idea is also that, of course, that you network with each other, get to know each other, even if it's virtual. It can bring benefits. So we have shared with you a link for networking. We will do that during the whole day as well. Please try to go to the booth. There are a couple of companies that really would like to talk to you as well, or try to talk to each other there. It's a virtual room. You have to literally log off of this link and then log on with the other link you have received to go to the virtual room. So I hope that you can do that, because there will be some demos, there will be some booth, and it is always nice to get to know new people. For us, we are now going to be away till I think 1:30. 1:30.